All right, so now you run a space station. You bought it for around $150 billion. Congratulations! You now operate the single most expensive object human beings have ever built, roughly the length of a football field, orbiting the Earth at roughly 17,500 miles an hour, 250 miles up. You have laboratories in orbit. Astronauts live under your authority. Spacecraft arrive at your docking ports. Governments, scientists, and private companies depend on the station staying operational. From the ground, it looks like you've inherited one of the most sophisticated machines humans have ever built. The International Space Station is not actually controlled by one owner. It is a multinational program involving NASA, Roscosmos, the European Space Agency, JAXA, and the Canadian Space Agency, with different partners responsible for different modules and capabilities. But assume all of that is now your problem. And this is where people's mental picture of the economics of a space station breaks down completely, because most people assume that once you've built the thing, the expensive part is over. It is not. NASA alone has been spending somewhere between $3 and $4 billion a year just to keep the ISS running. Surprisingly, only a third of it, around $350 billion a year, goes to pure science budget, the actual research being done. Nearly half of it, over $1.5 billion a year, is just transportation, rockets, capsules, seats, launches, and the smallest slice, right around $1 billion, is what NASA calls systems operations and maintenance, literally the cost of keeping a quarter-century-old machine from falling apart while it travels at 17,500 miles an hour. And that's your first real clue, because it tells you what the entire economic model of a space station is actually optimized around. It's not optimized around research output. It's optimized around minimizing how much stuff and how many trips you need to keep 6 or 7 humans alive and working before their mission ends and a new crew has to be flown up to replace them. But here's your first problem. Your crew is breathing. That sounds almost insulting to bring up first, but breathing isn't a one-time event. Every astronaut aboard your station is continuously consuming oxygen and producing carbon dioxide. They're drinking water, they're sweating it back into the air, they're using the bathroom. And unlike a building on Earth, you cannot connect your station to a water main. There is no sewage pipe, there is no electrical grid, and there is no delivery van arriving tomorrow morning with a replacement filter. NASA's baseline for hydration alone is about 2.5 liters of potable water per crew member per day. And that's just what they need to drink, not the full water turnover of a person living, washing, and working inside a sealed station. Multiply that by a crew, by a mission running for months, and you've got your first real lesson. Nothing about keeping people alive in orbit is a one-time cost. It's a bill that resets every single day. The obvious answer is to launch what they need: water up, food up, oxygen up, on a schedule. That works for a while, and it's roughly what early stations did. But treat every consumed liter and every consumed breath as disposable, and your cargo manifest fills up with things your crew already used once. You will waste your lifetime rocket capacity repeatedly launching the same basic resource from Earth. So you do something that sounds disgusting if you live on Earth. You don't just resupply, you recover. You install a water recovery system that reclaims water from urine, from the humidity your crew breathes and sweats in the cabin. Yes, that means what you think it means. Filtered until it's cleaner than most tap water on the ground. This is the first lesson in running your station. When a resource is difficult to deliver, you replace consumption with infrastructure. But infrastructure is not free. You stopped launching as much water. In exchange, you now own urine processors, water processors, pumps, filters, sensors, valves, and control electronics. You did not eliminate the dependency. You changed what the station depends on. The same thing happens with air. Your crew consumes oxygen every day and exhales carbon dioxide. You remove it from the cabin, you generate new oxygen. Some systems can even combine carbon dioxide with hydrogen and recover water. But the station is not a closed loop. Food still has to be launched. Some gases still have to be resupplied. So your station is not a self-sufficient ecosystem floating above the planet. It is a machine continuously trying to slow down the rate at which it consumes supplies from Earth. And every machine you add creates another problem. It needs power to run. Sunlight doesn't send you an invoice, but everything you do with it costs you somewhere else. Your solar arrays generate power, batteries store enough to get you through the stretch of every orbit spent in Earth's shadow, And the result gets distributed to life support, computers, experiments, communications, everything running on the station at once. Now you have electricity, the crew is alive, but almost every watt of power you use eventually creates heat. On Earth, getting rid of heat is so normal that most people never think about it. Buildings move air, cooling towers evaporate water, the atmosphere carries heat away. But your station is surrounded by vacuum, so you build a cooling system, loops of circulating ammonia that pick up heat from inside the station and carry it out to external radiators, where it radiates away into space. The station actually runs two independent ammonia loops on its main segment, specifically so one keeps working if the other doesn't. Hold on to that detail. It matters soon. The exact engineering is complicated, but the economics are simple. You added machinery to reduce cargo. The machinery needed power. The power and machinery created heat. Removing the heat required more machinery. And now your station contains pumps, fluid loops, heat exchangers, radiators, valves, sensors, and electrical distribution hardware that must keep working continuously. This is how a space station grows, not physically, but operationally. Every solution becomes another system you are now responsible for maintaining, and maintenance creates a problem that is much harder to solve in orbit: people. Every astronaut aboard is simultaneously an inhabitant, an operator, a maintenance technician, and a scientist. There's one of them per seat and 24 hours in their day, most of it already claimed by sleep, the exercise their bodies need just to survive months without gravity, meals, and routine housekeeping. The same human being you launched to conduct research may spend part of the week servicing the machine that allows the research to happen. An hour spent recovering from a station failure is an hour that cannot simultaneously be used for an experiment. This is where the economics of your station start becoming strange. On Earth, when a pump fails, you order a pump. Maybe delivery takes a day, maybe a week. A technician arrives, the pump is replaced. Your station cannot work like that. Imagine one of your cooling pumps fails 6 months from now. You have two choices: launch a spare before it fails, or wait. If you launch the spare now, it consumes cargo capacity. It has to be manufactured, qualified for spaceflight, integrated into a mission, launched on a compatible vehicle, transferred to the station, stored, tracked, and maybe the original pump never fails. Congratulations, you transported hundreds of kilograms of hardware into orbit and stored it for years for absolutely nothing to happen. But if you do not launch it and the pump does fail, you may have just discovered the one component your station cannot quickly replace. This is the midpoint where most people misunderstand why a space station is expensive. The space station has an inventory problem disguised as a rocket problem. The obvious story is that rockets cost a lot of money. That is true. But the more important decision may have already happened years before the rocket launches. By the time a component fails in orbit, the economically important choice may already be over. You had to estimate how likely the failure was, decide whether the component was critical, manufacture a replacement, qualify it, find cargo capacity, launch it, and place it where your crew could eventually use it. Then, wait. As of January 2014, NASA's spare parts inventory for the station, hardware officially known as orbital replacement units, was valued at roughly $1.1 billion, split almost evenly between components already sitting on the station and components waiting in warehouses on the ground. NASA spent about $90 million on these spares in fiscal year 2013 alone, with another $422 million planned between 2014 and 2020. That's not what most people picture when they imagine a space station budget. It's not rocket fuel. It's a warehouse, half of it in orbit, full of parts nobody's using yet, purchased specifically because somebody, someday, is going to need one on very short notice. You are spending real money on hardware you sincerely hope never gets touched. A spare quietly taking up storage space might be the most important purchase you made all year. Or it might turn out to be dead weight, and you don't find out until something breaks. None of that hardware gets to your station on its own. It arrives the same way everything else does, on a cargo vehicle launched from Earth, on a schedule someone else controls. Multiple companies and agencies fly cargo missions, and that's deliberate, the same redundancy logic as the spare parts, applied one layer up. If a single supplier has a bad day, you don't want your entire resupply chain going down with it. In an 8-month stretch spanning late 2014 into mid-2015, 3 separate cargo missions from 3 different providers were lost. NASA said afterward that the crew's consumables were never in danger. 3 different supply chains failed within months of each other, and the station didn't blink, because you weren't relying on just one. So you've built redundancy in your cooling loops, your spare parts, and your supply chain itself. On a quiet day, all of that duplicated capacity looks almost wasteful. Extra hardware, extra suppliers, mostly sitting idle. It doesn't look like an efficient way to run anything. It looks efficient only the day something actually breaks. On July 31st, 2010, one of your 2 ammonia cooling loops of the International Space Station failed. A pump module on the station's exterior tripped offline. Instantly, you'd lost half your active cooling capacity. If the second loop had failed too, you'd have been managing a genuine crisis instead of a serious repair job. This is exactly the moment that quiet, apparently wasteful hardware earns its keep. You already had spare ammonia pump modules sitting outside on the station, 4 of them, pre-positioned specifically for a failure like this one. Nobody had to wait on a rocket, the part was already there. Getting it installed was still brutal. The failed pump weighed 353 kilograms. Astronauts had to head outside and physically swap it, wrestling with frozen ammonia and stubborn fittings in pressurized suits. It took 3 separate spacewalks, totaling 22 hours and 49 minutes of spacewalk time, before the second loop was back online, and full redundancy was restored, while engineers on the ground coordinated the whole recovery in real time. Notice what actually got spent. Inventory that had been sitting in orbit for exactly this purpose. Nearly a full day's worth of your crew's most limited resource spent outside the station instead of inside a lab. The cooling loop existed because power turns into heat. The redundancy existed because critical systems can't have a single point of failure. The spare pump existed because someone predicted years in advance that a pump like this one might eventually fail. And the crew time it consumed came straight out of the same limited pool you were trying to protect for research in the first place. So, what does actually running this thing cost you every year? It depends heavily on which year and which slice of spending you're looking at. And that's not evasiveness, it's the honest shape of the number. In fiscal year 2013, NASA's total ISS operating costs ran about $2.8 billion. Roughly 43% of that, about $1.23 billion, went to systems operations and maintenance. Another 21% went to cargo transportation. Only about 10%, roughly $273 million, went directly to research, the actual science your station exists to produce. Most of the rest was the cost of getting crew members up and back down safely. More recently, NASA has used roughly $3 billion a year as shorthand for ISS spending, transportation included. A 2026 GAO report says crew and cargo transportation now make up about 60% of that figure. The accounting isn't directly comparable to the 2013 breakdown, but both tell the same story. The bill isn't dominated by a single dramatic rocket launch. It's spread across maintenance, spare parts, and the standing infrastructure required to keep predicting what breaks next. If you want the clearest way to see where the money actually goes, don't look at one annual total. Look at what you're really keeping on hand. There's the physical inventory, the spare pumps, the ORUs, the $1.1 billion sitting half in orbit and half on the ground. And there's a second kind of inventory that never shows up on any balance sheet, the unused capacity itself. The redundant cooling loop doing nothing right now. The second and third cargo provider you're not using this month. The margin built into the crew schedule for when something inevitably goes wrong. None of it produces a single watt of power or a single published result on its own. All of it is what lets your station survive the gap between a prediction and reality. So, think back to where you started. You believed you were taking over a technologically advanced building in orbit. Something built once and now simply operated, the way you'd run any facility on the ground. That was never quite it. You were running a system built around the fact that you cannot react quickly. Every liter of water you recover instead of launching buy you logistics margin, at the cost of machinery that itself needs maintaining. Every spare pump sitting quietly in storage bought you response time, at the cost of launch capacity spent on something you hoped to never touch. Every extra cargo provider you bought you a supply chain that can absorb one failed rocket without stranding your crew. Every hour your crew doesn't spend fixing something is an hour they get to spend doing the work you actually sent them up there for, and that hour is never guaranteed. You didn't inherit a building in space. You inherited the job of guessing, years in advance, what's going to go wrong up there before it happens, and paying, quietly, every year to be ready anyway. Because something will fail. You won't know exactly what, and you won't know exactly when. By the time you find out, the replacement may still be hundreds of kilometers below you. You don't run a space station by perfectly predicting what will break. You run it by surviving the fact that your prediction will be imperfect.